All right, we are recording now.
All right, so today's Tuesday, April 14th, 5 o'clock. This is a meeting of the Whitman Finance Committee. We do have a couple of people that haven't logged in yet, but I'll take this opportunity to go quickly through the agenda. Everybody get a copy of this by email?
Yes.
So we have meeting minutes to vote for last week. Reserve fund stands at $30,314. Public forums suspended due to the COVID-19 limitations. Under new business, we'll talk a little bit about the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District budget, which is now not set again. We'll talk about the warrant articles, capital expenditures committee recommendations. We'll get Dave to give us a report from his last meeting. And the Board of Selectmen actions and town meeting date, now that that's revised. Subcommittee reports. So one of those will be for me to give you an overview of the agenda for tomorrow's Regional Agreement Amendment Committee meeting, which I'm really looking forward to. And then we will take a look and start voting the Article 2 lines, as long as we do have the rest of our members call in or log in. So that's it. Everybody have a copy of the meeting minutes that Samantha emailed out? I forwarded them from Samantha yesterday.
Yes.
April 7th meeting minutes.
Yes.
Did anybody not have an opportunity to look at them?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, before we get to that, Randy, is there something that you want to bring up under new business or anything that you want to add, or are you just going to sit in on the meeting?
No, I will just be sitting in on the meeting.
Okay.
I appreciate the invite, and I'll just quickly what I had said before the meeting actually formally began was that just something to be conscious about. Back when the budget override committees, started, we were very close this year, and again, a tremendous amount of deviation from what the budget override evaluation committee had set would only put strain on fiscal 22.
Okay, and hopefully you are still present when we talk about that under the capital expenditure committee recommendation agenda item. We did have an email, and I had a conversation with the fire chief today. So we're going to have a discussion regarding the ambulance fund and the warrant articles related to that. So yeah,
Okay.
Your input would be helpful for that if you wanted to stick around.
I have a quick
All right.
question. I have a Connor Thomas trying to call in. Does anybody know if that's somebody's significant other, possibly Rosemary's
No, it's not
computer?
Rosemary.
Rosemary's son is named Connor.
Okay. I will then admit Connor in and see if it's really Rosemary.
She's waiting to be let in by you, John.
Okay, that's it.
She thought it was at 5:30.
Okay.
I'm here.
All right, sorry, you came in as Connor Thomas, so I wasn't sure who that was. So
It's my
I was yeah. That's thank Justin for letting us know. I was gonna kick you out, but I will rename you now. Well, with all the security going
The securities, yeah.
getting Zoom bombed, I'm trying to protect us, and I have a waiting room, and you don't get in unless I know you. Yeah.
Where's the video?
All right, Rosemary, at this point, we are called to order, and we are about to review the meeting minutes from last week. Did you get a copy of them by email yesterday?
Yes, I did.
Okay. All right, so it's 2 pages. We'll entertain a motion to take a look at and evaluate the meeting minutes on page 1, April 7th. Does anybody have any changes that they'd like to see on page 1?
No.
Nope.
No.
2, anything that needs to be changed, edits, amendments?
I'm noticing something on page 2, and it's actually Mr. Cordero's statement. So I just want to bring it to his attention. On the top of page 2, it runs on from the first paragraph, and it says the articles are not recommending the funding sources, and it's assumption that the funding for the articles will come from Chapter 90 free cash or the enterprise fund. I'm assuming you also meant to include the levy as a funding source, Dave.
Yes.
So maybe we can amend that the articles will come from the levy, comma, chapter 90, free cash, or the enterprise fund.
Correct. That's what I said.
Okay,
Got it.
got it. All right, anything else on that page? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to accept the April 7th, 2020 meeting minutes as amended.
Go ahead.
I move.
I'll
Kathleen?
second it.
John seconds. Further discussion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Kathleen?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Rosemary?
Yes.
And I vote yes, and the only one absent was Al Cafferty, and he's not here today, so. All right, you got that, Samantha? Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So the next item under new business is the school committee, Whitman Hanson Regional High School budget. So I don't know if anyone else had an opportunity to take a look at the school committee meeting or listen to it as it is on April 8th. But I did take some notes. As we discussed last week in our meeting, the budget vote should not have been allowed. It was out of order. So they then revisited the conversation. The public comment included 2 letters, and very well written letters, which took exception to not including the 4 teachers. So there was some discussion. The letters weren't read in their entirety, but there was some additional conversation regarding that. Following that, Fred Small did vote to recommend the budget be set at $55,040,238. And then the discussion went on to say that now that Whitman had postponed its town meeting, that they had some opportunity to give them a little bit more time to set the budget. So a roll call vote happened again, and then so now for this particular vote, some of the committee members did not vote in the affirmative because the budget did not include the reinstatement of the 4 teachers. So at the end of the day, the final analysis was for the committee to set a date for the reconvening of the newly formed Regional Agreement Amendment Committee. And they set the meeting date for April 15th at 3 o'clock. So did anybody else take anything else out of that meeting other than they now have no recommendation for a budget? And that really kind of puts a little bit of a logjam in our process as well, because we're looking to review the Article 2, and obviously this is a big part of it. So anybody else? Kathleen?
So I sat in on the meeting, as I'm participating now, but what's holding them up, I believe, is either the hope that there's a compromise out there that Hanson will be relieved of some of the impact of moving to the statutory method, or that the newly resurrected Regional Agreement Amendment Committee can come up with something. One person's even hoping to reinstate the alternative method as opposed to statutory, and I think that's a pipe dream. So I think there's some confusion as to why people are hesitant to support the budget. Some of it is for the lack of the 4 teachers' salaries being included, and some of it is for waiting for some miracle to rescue Hanson.
Right. So Randy and I had a conversation last week, early this week, regarding the conversations that he has had to date. Randy, you want to give the board an update on the discussions that have led the way to the postponement, I guess, of the school committee making the recommendation? Because there is some hope, I guess, that there'll be a phased-in approach, or that a recommendation will be to revert back to an alternative method for setting the assessment. So can you give us the board a little bit of a history on your discussions with the selectmen from Hanson?
Randy, before you jump in, I just want to let everybody know that Ralph has joined the meeting. So Samantha, so that you know, Ralph is in it as well.
Welcome, Ralph.
Glad to be here.
So we got you in audio
We still
only.
have electricity out at my house.
Oh, is that why you're dark?
Well,
All
there was
right.
no electricity, so I had to go back to Braintree to the office to try to set up there. But for some reason, it was giving me a little more aggravation than normal.
All right. Well, we'll give you some latitude. Right
There
now,
he
we
is.
are just finished completing, reviewing the meeting minutes from last week, and now we're having a discussion regarding the regional school committee and the setting of the budget. Randy, you still there?
Yes. Whenever you're ready, Rick, I'll
Go ahead.
give a brief synopsis, and Justin, anything I leave out, feel free to add to. So we did, it appeared we were having some very solid discussions going along, primarily over the fiscal issues regarding the assessment change. What I thought was relatively close to having some type of agreement to present, which may have involved us making a minor concession of a one-time purchase as far as a capital item. We then went to the school committee that evening. Ms. Timmett spoke, basically got up there and said we would need a budget, and so our discussions could kind of be a little more solidified. Following that school committee meeting, we then had a small group joint meeting with members from Hanson, myself, Selectman Evans, Jeff Simonak, George Farrow, Bob Hayes sat in, and we had some representatives from Mars at that meeting, just to basically answer any unresolved questions firsthand regarding statutory versus alternative and the reasons for proceeding like that. After that, I would say we hit a lull from the school not setting a budget to now it seems as if what was kind of being talked about has fallen through, basically because I don't believe we have the commitment from Hanson to be providing enough funds. I don't have an exact number, but it's not close enough where any type of agreement is going to work. So we now move to the Regional Agreement Committee, starting, and basically I do have some slight issues with this because now we have members making financial decisions for our town that ultimately I would hope that the Board of Selectmen has taken a vote to proceed statutory. I know you guys have voted that statutory, and just in our conversation was just, is that the path we are going to follow? I stand behind that, and I personally think it is the best thing in the long term for our town, our students, and ultimately the school district, that people start, the towns pay their fair share, and the state aid which our town qualifies for is directed now not to another town, but our students will see a direct benefit of that. So we really, as that meeting takes shape tomorrow, in my opinion, it's going to be starting from scratch, because I don't believe there's any deal even to be worked on at the moment. And I've yet to, and possibly if Justin has, I know he's kind of taken point on this, received any confirmation or concrete numbers of what they're willing to do this year.
Yeah, I still
And
haven't.
that's,
I haven't received any solid numbers from Hanson yet.
So, Justin, so you're taking the lead on this, and at what point was the Finance Committee going to be involved in the information that you are negotiating with the selectmen in Hanson regarding Whitman's finances?
It's been a delicate balance. As you know, the regional agreement committee has been put together and disassembled several times. One of the iterations included members of the finance committee. I think this one does as well. Rick, are you going to be there tomorrow?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay. So, the Board of Selectmen hasn't really been involved in the negotiations either. This has been trying to find at least a method forward before we get into specifics of numbers and budgetary impact. The Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen have weighed in on statutory method being the preferred method. So that's the input we have from the respective boards so far. After we have something to report back to you, I'm sure Randy or I will be making the rounds, or Frank is now a member of the committee.
Where can we find minutes for this meeting? What date was it on? So we can read the minutes.
There hasn't been a meeting yet. It's posted for tomorrow at 3 p.m.
The prior meeting that fell through that you and Randy were at with other people from the other schools. What was the date of that meeting?
I've not been at a posted meeting yet. I've been part of the subcommittee. There was an initial meeting. Randy attended.
How many people were at that meeting?
Randy, do you remember how many people were there? The first meeting that then dissolved.
I was there for that.
I was there for that too.
That's been the only public meeting so far.
Okay, so the meeting, just to clarify, the meeting that
I wasn't asking about public meeting. I was asking for more than 4 people that should have been posted. How many people were at those meetings?
There's not been more than a quorum of any assembled committee. So there hasn't been.
I think these things need to start to be in public, particularly if you're talking about finances of our town and that would be handling finances that Hanson should be handling. I've said it before. It looks like backdoor deals. I'm going to say it again, particularly because we've lost millions and it's only been an oops. That's the only explanation we've gotten is oops. So I really think that these need to be out in the open. That's my opinion.
Rosemary, Kathleen had a question. Go ahead.
I just want to add another layer of information. This was from listening to last week's Board of Selectmen meeting at Hanson, where Laura Kemet discussed a meeting that John Stanbrook, I believe, is their town administrator, and Frank and Jeff Simonik had. So the 3 of them had a conference call where the 3 of them tried to work out some compromise. I don't know what compromise means. And the specifics that John Stanbrook mentioned were that perhaps Whitman would purchase or pay for a curriculum piece, and then it got very non-specific. Whitman might be picking up some special ed considerations because it's so volatile. So clearly there was a conference call between Frank, John Stanbrook, and Jeff Simonik that the Board of Selectmen and Hanson had some specifics about. And Laura Kemet was holding out hope that that may lead the way to the compromise and the promise plan.
So Randy, is that the suggestion or the?
No. Now I do not know what. The only information I have regarding the 2 town administrators talking is the simple statement that they were not able to come to an agreement on the numbers. At no point in any meetings with Justin and I sat in did we ever offer to pick up special education costs. I know when I was listening to one of the school committee meetings one night, somebody had mentioned something about snow and ice. We had never offered anything, any payments like that. What was discussed was to try and make sure our kids, if Hanson was not able to meet the full amount, that our students would not suffer further, and that we would try to fund a curriculum portion that Hanson would receive a benefit from us doing it, but I think that was our olive branch that really was making sure that our kids benefited by way of a new, I think it's a reading or English curriculum. So that was tossed out, but there were a lot of parameters behind that. of Hanson getting to a certain dollar amount. And I don't think that dollar amount is going to be met by them as we talk tonight. So
Okay.
that's why I say when that group starts tomorrow, I think it's starting at a clean slate.
Well, the problem with now, just segueing into the regional agreement subcommittee reconvening, is the expectation, would you not agree, is to revisit the methodology for assigning assessment to the member towns. Is that not correct?
I would say no. Well, let me just jump in. Absolutely not. But by no means were we ever deviating from our method. Board of Selectmen took a vote, and we've yet to rescind that vote, and I don't see that happening.
No, I'm not talking about the Board of Selectmen. I'm talking about tomorrow night's meeting. The purpose of the meeting, wouldn't you agree that this is now Hanson's latest attempt to somehow defer paying their assessment?
I don't.
I'm not. Go ahead,
Yeah, I
Justin.
don't think that anyone in Hanson realistically believes that they can amend a regional agreement, pass it, and get it approved by DESI in the next 2 months, while DESI has quite a lot going on.
Okay. All right, John, you had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that discussion of going back to the alternative method. The school committee voted in December, as we all know, to do their budget in the statutory method. That's the only budget that the school committee can put forward. They cannot rescind that vote. There was discussion a couple meetings ago brought up by Mr. Kane about the possibility of rescinding that vote. And that was overruled because in order to rescind a vote, you have to do it. The vote cannot have caused something else to happen. And since that vote has gone on, both towns have been working their budgets based on the statutory method. So there isn't any way possible that the school committee can change that vote other than the regional agreement committee passing a new agreement within the next 2 months. So any budget that comes out of the school committee has to be statutory. Only that committee can change it. And we all know that's not going to happen by June 30th.
Right. Okay, does anybody else want to weigh in at all on the upcoming meeting?
Just a point of clarification on what John said. It takes the vote of the town, the will of the town, to change the agreement method. They can take the recommendations of the committee, but that takes a vote of the town for that to be changed.
Well, the other part of it is too, is if the regional agreement amendment committee does pass some type of a modified agreement, it still has to go back to both member towns for ratification. So I would hope that if in fact some modified form of the assessment method was included and brought back to the town of Whitman, obviously it wouldn't be in our best interest to support it. So.
Nope.
Anybody else? We'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you both, Randy and Justin, for your input. Like I said, we've kind of been in the dark about this whole, the whole subject. So it's nice to have just a little bit more information. So on the warrant articles, I believe John forwarded you the latest copy of the written warrant. Not. We're still a couple of weeks away from reviewing the warrant to make recommendations. I know the Board of Selectmen will be reviewing the warrant at the meeting on your next meeting, Justin, the 21st. Is that correct?
Yeah, next Tuesday.
Yeah.
21st.
And the warrant is on the agenda. So, we did do a pass through last week and took a look at a brief summary of all of the warrant articles as they stand. And so visiting that once the Board of Selectmen has been able to review it and make any necessary changes.
Rick, is it your plan to recommend to the Board of Selectmen not to ratify the warrant until they have recommendations from the Finance Committee?
Our recommendations go to town meeting. No, they don't go to the selectmen. Is that the question? What was the question specifically, Dave?
Yeah, my question was, are you going to notify the are you going to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that they don't ratify the warrant until recommendations from the Finance Committee? The Finance Committee has a role in determining the source of funds. So if we disagree in any of the funding sources of these amendments, and then the warrant article gets voted by this Board of Selectmen, they're making a vote on something that the Finance Committee has not recommended.
At the end of the day, the recommendations of the Finance Committee are what get published in the warrant, and that is what is presented to town meeting. So,
So is your answer yes or no?
no,
Okay.
no. The answer is no.
All right. That makes this committee completely useless in terms of the warrant.
Maybe I'm not understanding your question, Dave.
The purpose of this committee is to make the recommendations on behalf of the town.
Right?
Those recommendations should be made to the Board of Selectmen so they can make a informed decision on whether or not, on the form of the article, and whether or not it should be on the warrant. How can they make a vote on articles if they're not getting recommendations from the Finance Committee?
Okay, I guess I misunderstood your question. The answer is yes, then, if that's the answer that better suits your question. The reason why the selectmen are going to review the warrant is to find out if they want to take anything off of it. Following that, the Finance Committee will make the recommendations on all of the warrant articles, including the funding sources.
Okay. So it's your recommendation that the Board of Selectmen don't approve the warrant until recommendations from Finance Committee.
Well, I don't make any recommendations. It's the board of the Finance Committee is a collective will of this board to make recommendations on the warrant. So is there something specific that you would like to send to the selectmen in the warrant in advance of that?
I'd like to make a motion that we send an email to the Board of Selectmen recommending that they don't approve the warrant until they have the recommendations from FinCom.
I would second that.
I don't think we're changing the way we do things at all. I think we've done that. We've always done that. I don't really think we need a vote of the committee to do what we've always done.
I think what the concern that I have is that if the warrant is signed by the selectmen on the 21st, and there are still issues that on how those articles are going to be funded, the fact that they're signed, I mean, I don't know, once it's signed, the warrant articles can't change, can they?
They absolutely can. You can amend the funding source on town hall floor. I mean,
Plus,
I understand
believe
that, but
they can
go
be
ahead.
taken away too. They can be left off
they
the
can be
warrant.
passed over. How about some input from selectmen? Do you see any deviance of the way we've been doing things? Scott, you're on mute. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to the discussion about how we make recommendations to the town?
We're planning on having a joint meeting with the selectmen anyways, aren't we?
We are on the 5th, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem if we made it known what our position is on the articles, but for the most part, anything can happen on town meeting floor. We know that. I mean, if there's a number in there, we can change the number to a lesser number. We could remove the article, pass over the article. We probably could change the funding source. Doesn't this, if we were planning on doing it out of free cash. So yeah, I'm not, I'm not opposed to us making a recommendation, and I'm not really sure what we've done in the past. Your committee, I mean, it seems to me we've always had a joint meeting at some point, though.
Right, and there are definitely occasions where the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee differ on funding sources, on wording, or even on the warrant article itself. So I think it's important that, we work together as much as practicable, but at the end of the day, it's the recommendation of the Finance Committee that gets printed on the warrant that goes before the town, and it's the voters that come out to approve or not approve a warrant article.
Dave,
Not only that, but I think we also have to be prepared on the town meeting. If there is some sort of a conflict here, then we better be prepared to explain our decision.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
mean. If there's some specific item here, Dave, that you're concerned about, that I don't understand how you can conceivably feel that the Board of Selectmen are going to usurp the authority of the Finance Committee making recommendations to town meeting. I don't see it happening. I've never seen it happen.
That's not what I asked. I asked whether or not we were going to send an email notification to the Board of Selectmen recommending that they don't sign it. I didn't say anything about anything more than that.
That they don't sign it.
I have an issue of them signing the warrant before we have our joint meeting.
Okay.
I think that's the concern that I have, is that we were originally supposed to meet them next week, and obviously that got pushed back because of the whole thing got pushed back. But for them to sign the warrant without having our joint meeting is really the concern that I have, because there are some things that need to get discussed. I mean, right now,
Yeah.
in my opinion, and I outlined it in the form that went out, that the sources of funding are not proper, and there's about almost $400,000 worth of articles that are funded from the levy that is more than what we have in the levy. And those are the things. It's not like we can't fund them. It just needs to get moved around a little bit and discussed and worked out. But for us to have them sign something that says raise and appropriate, and we're $377,000 over what we're raising and appropriating, or what we're raising, that's an issue to me. And I think it's an issue for the Capital Committee too, to recommend articles where the funding sources aren't properly laid out. I mean, I know the Capital Committee doesn't recommend funding, but if they're going to recommend an article to be voted on, they should be comfortable knowing that the town can afford to do it.
Certainly should be a funding source available and identified.
Correct.
So, I think that they absolutely should be aware of it. And certainly, I think we have two selectmen on the call. I mean, you wouldn't contemplate signing or following through with all this without a joint meeting happening first anyways, would you guys?
No, I'd like to have a joint meeting before we sign the warrant. I mean, I know Dave and I on the Capital Committee might be in a different position, but most members of the Capital Committee don't know or don't closely follow the funding sources of each article. So they're more recommending just the project and the need for it. But
we better recommend it knowing that there are funds.
Right. That's
yeah.
not right. On the first meeting of the budget season, it was brought up by a committee member and overwhelmingly supported that we had two responsibilities. One is to make recommendations of capital articles, and two, ensure that there is funding associated with that. So although we're not directly involved in the funding source, our concerns are around whether or not we have enough funding for those capital items.
Okay. Well, I think we all share your concern about the selectmen signing the warrant before we've had a mutual discussion. So I think that's not going to happen. So I think maybe if you're really concerned about any specific warrant article, we should take the time right now to go through the warrant and you tell us what your concerns are so that we can make sure we address them before we move forward in the budget process.
Well, I mean, first of all, we did have a motion and a second on Dave's motion, so I don't know what that exactly entails, but I certainly would want to discuss. I mean, we're in this part of where we're discussing warrant articles. I don't know if everybody will see this, but the form that I sent out, which is, hold on, let me see if I can get it out, which is this one right here. Does everybody see that on my screen, on your screen now? Do you see the whole thing? Do you see the orange part on the bottom as well?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So if you look right now, this column right now, these are all the articles that Frank gave us last week. This is Frank's form. I added the two articles that he had blank initially that we discussed last week were P9 and P10 and P11 actually, but there's no funding there. So we've got $44,254,000 worth of articles, and that includes Article 2. Right now, we have an estimated revenue of $44 million. So we have about 108,000 left over, which, okay, not bad. The issue that I have is that in this column right here, that's levy column, and these are where the funding sources are for all of these. He comes up to $37,156,549, and by my calculations, and I've asked about this, we only have $36,779 available in the levy, so that we're over appropriating by $377,000. There are also the yellow items are articles that he did not give us a funding source on, and that adds up to $258,000. So we've got about $500,000 worth of articles that are don't have either a proper funding source or don't have a funding source allocated at all. And I know this is a draft and we're working on this, but I would hate to not resolve this until the, I would want to have it resolved before it's signed by the Board of Selectmen.
I think we're all in agreement, John. I don't think anybody does not agree with the fact that the Board of Selectmen are not going to sign the warrant until we have reviewed it and had a joint meeting and then make recommendations, including the funding sources. It's just a standard procedure. We're not deviating from anything we've done in the last 20 years as a finance committee.
Okay.
The only thing I can see is we're getting bogged down, and
Right.
from a capital committee standpoint, in funding sources. I mean, it goes, it's what Randy would refer to as scope creep.
Funding source is not a capital committee issue. You've said for weeks now that it's a finance committee issue. It's capital,
Right.
But don't drag the capital committee into the issue that we're having here. The motion on the table is to have the finance committee to tell the Board of Selectmen not to sign the warrant until they have all our recommendations.
Dave, I don't know. I really don't know why you're getting combative. We are all in agreement.
Clarifying.
We're all in agreement that they are not going to sign the warrant until we have a recommendation from the finance committee inclusive of funding sources.
Can we move the vote? Can we move the vote then? We have a, sorry.
Like I said, the motion's on the table. It's been seconded. I'd like a vote on it.
Okay. We have a motion on the table. Do you want to restate your motion?
The motion is for the finance committee chair to send a notification to the Board of Selectmen with a recommendation not to sign the warrant without the recommendations of the finance committee or before our joint meeting.
And I seconded it.
Okay, further discussion. My discussion on the topic is that we have never done that, and we have no intention of doing it. So if you'd like to move forward with the vote, we will. But to me, it's wholly unnecessary.
I think that a lot of our recommendations from Madden and that have come in have changed things that we once did and made us look at funding sources in a different way. That's my opinion on the matter, but I would agree with Dave.
Okay, all in favor of the motion?
You have to do a roll call.
Roll call vote. Kathleen?
No.
Dave?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Rosemary?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes too, just to move it along. Okay,
Thank you.
an email will be sent with a recommendation that the selectmen not sign the warrant until we send our recommendation.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move to the Capital Expenditure Committee report. Dave.
So we met last week and voted one capital warrant. And that was P7. Now, the way it was described with amended language, based on the amended language that 100 to see if the town will vote to create a reserve, appropriate money. Let's see, 150 for the ambulance reserve purchase ambulance, and 100 for the ladder truck repairs. Now, my intent as the chairman of that is to that committee is to now rescind that vote because the information that we've been provided is incorrect. On the email that the chairman of this committee has sent out, that the fiscal year 2021 request from the fire department is different. It's asking for $100,000 for ladder truck, $60,000 for building maintenance, and $65,000 for vehicle. An ambulance is not included in the fiscal 21 costs. So, like I said, it's my intent to rescind that vote, get the new information out to the members of that committee, and re-vote that warrant article. That's it. That's all that happened during that meeting.
Okay, so to follow up on the discussion then, so the discussion at your committee meeting was on to whether or not you were going to approve the creating an account for an ambulance reserve for purchase account, right? One of the recommendations that came out of the Budget Override Evaluation Committee regarding the ambulance fund was to set aside a sum of money to determine by the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee for the purchase of an ambulance and 3 sets of turnout gear every 3 years. Is that the wording that I am correct in assuming that that's what the Board of Selectmen signed as a Madden recommendation moving forward, right? So what I'm saying about with the article for the ambulance is there nowhere in that recommendation did it say anything about a ladder truck, right? So is it the plan of the capital committee to then put the ladder truck repairs under a separate warrant article?
Well, technically, it can't go under a separate because of the format of the warrant. It can't go under a different warrant article, according to Frank. So that's why we've asked him to parse out the 2 charges. So for ladder town meetings, the $100,000 for ladder truck would then be eliminated and allow for just the $150 for the ambulance. And again, part of hopefully by next town meeting, we're anticipating that we could have a capital improvement plan prepared that would allow for the dollar value for each reoccurring cost, meaning a purchase of ambulance and vehicles, turnout gear, scuba, things of that nature, and have a schedule of items. So that schedule of items can be drawn out based on their life expectancy to provide a yearly value on that. And then all those yearly values be added up to allow for that charge to be part of the article, part of a warrant article each year. So it's a consistent spending number, value that allows for better projection of capital available for capital projects in the future.
Okay, so to follow up a little bit with the chief's call today and the discussion and then his subsequent email, he's of the contention that the way this is set up now isn't going to give him an adequate sum of money for the purchase of the fire department's gear. So I think this is probably more or less what Randy was asking a little earlier, is that if we're now starting to deviate from the recommendations of our consultant, this is going to be the first thing that we decimate. What if maybe you could give me in a sense, or somebody that was on the override evaluation committee, why Mr. Madden recommended that this ambulance account be dissolved? What was the intent?
Well, go ahead, Randy.
All right. It does seem to me like this is something that has kind of taken on a life of its own outside of the recommendation by Mr. Madden. This was not the removal of the ambulance account, or getting rid of the way it was now, was that the funds from that would now go in as a general revenue. The goal was to create a reserve for appropriation account with specific purposes in mind, being ambulance and turnout gear. I'd go back to the January 21st meeting, which was our last joint meeting that the Board of Selectmen voted on, and I believe that Mr. Madden's recommendation was to dissolve the current ambulance account, create a reserve for appropriation account for ambulance purchases and turnout gear, of which was somewhere in the area of $160,000 to $200,000. And that was the vote of the Board of Selectmen. This was not going to be, I think the spirit of this was not going to be to create another capital account where we're limiting the funds to the fire department. What we were doing was because these are large known purchases that are spread out of a certain period of time, that we would provide the funding source, and the rest of of the fire department's capital would fall in line with just how just about every other unit of town government falls in line with their capital articles. If they show a need and back up to you guys and are funded out of what is available funds based on priority. A lot of those priorities have already been determined through the Collins report, the capital report, which they've done. What that kind of left out was a means to be able to keep up with ambulance purchase and turnout gear. So the spirit of it was not to create just another capital account for the fire department. It was very specific. And what I would say is the 160 probably is not enough. That there was talk of, because the way the ambulance purchases are done, they're done in back-to-back years. So we did see a problem that if next year we have to purchase an ambulance, that account would not build up enough funds the previous year to purchase that. So there was talk of splitting up that cycle with possibly an ambulance purchase this year, gives us a 2-year break where that fund is built back up, and we'd have enough to purchase the next ambulance. In turn, that fund builds back up. We provide the turnout gear, and we go from there. But the rest of these capital articles would fall in line under the Collins Center matrix and how that was established. And Justin, if you want to kind of chime in on that, or if I had got something wrong.
Yeah, that was a good summary of the Madden recommendations. It really ran into conflict with the Collins Center, sort of a capital improvement plan, but it was put together by UMass Boston, because any capital item that had outside funding got immediate priority. And so the fire department's ambulance account had immediate priority for every item coming through there, which has been great for the fire department, but it ran into conflict where they were able to purchase administrative vehicles more frequently than equivalent departments elsewhere. Haven't seen it as a huge problem in the past, but as we're coming into a cash crunch and you've got the police department weighing purchasing cruisers against the DPW, weighing can they get a new truck that the finance committee sees every year, but the fire department has a dedicated account. So that was kind of where it ran into Madden's recommendations, and it's going to be a problem for us using the Collins data on any items that had previously used that account.
So it's understandable that this is a work in progress. Obviously, we're going to get to the point where we're going to have a capital improvement plan. But in order to get there, I think we just need to communicate better. If we're going to deviate from the recommendations of the consultant that we paid for, I think we should all be on the same page. If in fact, the chief has had a conversation with Frank about, there's not enough money in that 160,000 to fund his operations the way he sees fit, well, that's a discussion that should be had with everybody. And the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee and the Capital Committee should all be part of the discussion before we amend the recommendations we're using as the roadmap. Is there anyone not in agreement with that? So I guess, Dave, do you suspect you're going to get more information about that article so that you can, you said that you're going to rescind the vote from the last meeting you had regarding that article?
Well, yeah, based on, I did get new information. That was from the email that you forwarded to us, to this committee. And that new information is that the fire chief for fiscal year 21 wants to allocate $100,000 to the ladder truck, $60,000 to building maintenance, and $65,000 toward a vehicle, which again, what Randy Lamontina had clearly pointed out is that goes completely against the spirit of the Madden report, and it goes against the information that we've been provided meaning the Buildings Facility Capital Committee, information provided by the town administrator. So, it's my thought that this warrant article is I don't know, how would you describe it? Wrought with inaccuracies and misinformation.
Right, and just be clear on why I forwarded this. I got this spreadsheet within minutes of the Finance Committee getting it. This isn't to say that I endorse anything in it. It's merely that I forwarded it from the fire chief so that this discussion could be had. I think the document itself is what creates this discussion. I'm certainly not advocating, and I am actually not advocating from deviating from the Madden recommendations that we have. So, like I said, this was forwarded from the chief so that we could have this discussion. John.
Go
ahead, Randy.
Rick, if I can just chime in. I'm not saying that the ladder truck, the repairs on that is not, doesn't have merit or is not warranted. I believe it is. It is also one of the things that, to allude back to the Collins report, that is on there as a priority.
I agree.
So it does just kind of, for me, it is, I guess, to go back to that funding source issue. To me, that's a general capital issue that is a priority, and I don't know why we are not dissolving the former ambulance account, creating the new one under the parameters and guidelines that the consultant set forth for its specific purpose, and then looking at the fire capital requests and prioritizing them based off information from the Capital Committee, or do it in conjunction with the Collins report. But as far as the way the article is worded, that's where the problem seems to come, is that from what Mr. Madden said is we would dissolve the ambulance account, create the new reserve for appropriation account for the specific purposes which we've previously discussed now, and then the rest of the fire capital would fall in the queue along with other town departments, and be funded based on need and priority. I don't know why it's, and I've yet to speak with Frank about it, but I do plan on asking him why it kind of got jumbled into one, one article where me personally, I think it should have been just boom, 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 dissolve, create the new account under the parameters, and then list off whatever fire capital was determined to be necessarily met this fiscal year. So
I agree. That's where
I'm not.
it took a bad turn.
So everything that I've seen so far is that ladder truck repair needs to be done. I guess my issue is it just kind of got jumbled up in a way that I think really is convoluting the issue now.
Yeah. Okay. John, you wanted to wait something?
Yeah, I just real quick. To hash this all out, wouldn't it be best to get on a agenda maybe next week even to ask Chief Greno to call in on our meeting so we can ask him the questions himself and maybe make sure Frank is involved as well.
I agree.
I think that, and even the capital committee, Dave, you may want to get him in on your committee as well. I think he probably needs to be involved with both because this is a big change. So
I agree.
Yep.
And I would just add, going back to the budget override committee, the funding source and whether things are coming out of the levy is pretty important. Dissolving that account was to add to our available levy funds. So if we now start allocating money that really wasn't in that initial plan, that's what I was talking about. You could possibly create a bigger problem in the next fiscal cycle. So if we were to divide these two articles, you have a one-time payment, which would be the fire truck ladder repair. And then you have a consistent payment going into the reserve for appropriation account. So I don't want to see where we've allotted money based off a one-time purchase that possibly is short next year.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yep. Anybody else have anything to add on that? Okay, looking at the agenda, so Board of Selectmen did vote to move town meeting date. Right now, we're set up for June 3rd, but I believe that's more or less a place setter because that's a Wednesday, and we're probably likely going to still meet on, I would assume, on a Monday. But that was the limit for the 30 days that they could go out, and then they can go out up to another 30 days if the recommendation from Public Safety and Board of Health is going to limit our ability to have a town meeting. That's really what's driving the bus at this point with the date. So it does give us some more flexibility with, making sure we, like I said last week, we have an opportunity to take some more time. And I think it's important for the capital committee to have as much time as they need to make recommendations on the capital warrant articles, because that's a big part of this particular budget. So like I said, I'm on board with giving as much time as you need, Dave. How many more warrant articles are on the agenda for a capital committee to make recommendations for, off the top of your head?
There are 11, potentially 12 capital warrant articles. We've made votes on 8.
Okay. So realistically, it's hard to say. Obviously, you've got some significant discussions that you had on one article. It's obviously the most complex, to dissolve the ambulance reserve for appropriation account, and then try to create a warrant article that makes sense and falls within the guidelines that we are supposed to be working with. So it's going to take time, right? Weeks. We have
Yes.
4 weeks at least before we need to make Finance Committee recommendations on these warrant articles. So. All right. Anybody else? I got some feedback coming. John. You know why?
I don't. Seems like it went away though.
Okay. So subcommittee reports, again, I did give you the information about the the remote conference for the 2020 Regional Agreement Amendment Committee. It is tomorrow at 3:00.
That will be broadcast live on WHCA,
Okay.
just like a regular school committee meeting is.
Okay.
So just to give you an idea of the agenda, open meeting, Superintendent Jeff Simonak, first meeting. Item number 2, introductions. A, subcommittee of the Regional School Committee, and B, the Regional Agreement Amendment Committee members. Item number 3 is the Regional Agreement Amendment by the chair. And then sub letter A is primary objectives, and number 4 is to adjourn. And the chair is listed as the person who's going to be running the meeting. So
Who is the chair?
it looks as though Jeff Simonak is going to be the chair for the first meeting.
Okay.
And then maybe they're going to probably organize the committee and vote a chair in. I would assume it'd be one of the, it's not on the agenda, but reorganization is probably one of the first agenda items. That maybe it's part of the introductions, but it's not spelled out in the agenda. So that's it on that. John forwarded out several documents. One of them is the newest copy of Article 2. Does everybody have it?
Yes.
And so as you said, John, the only change is that the,
Yeah, we talked about it last week. That was it 192, based on an email that came from Bruce Martin, based on the last invoice they got on it, and Frank actually put it a little higher than what Bruce had recommended, which it's only a little bit more, but I think that that's really the only change between it. He did change the format of the report, and he added a column called no COLA, which is, I guess, taking raises away. And that's what I don't really know. Frank's not here, so I don't really know what the objective of that column is.
well, COLA is a cost of living allowance.
Adjustment
All right.
allowance.
All right. So I guess for whatever reason, he felt the need to put that in, and I don't know what behind the scenes discussions are prompting that column to be added. But I guess that's what that is. I really didn't look at it to figure out which columns were affected. But it does look like his salary is the first one on the column that gets affected. But again, without him here, I don't see there's any warrant to discussing what that's all about.
Right, and you haven't seen him chime in, John, as far as coming into the meeting.
No, he is not.
Yeah, I was looking at that, actually trying to interpret why he put it there. Obviously, there's been discussion over the last couple of years with the cash crunches that we've been in, the fact that we might have to go a year with no raises, maybe some kind of wage freeze. There's a lot of businesses out there doing it now. The COVID-19, we're going to have less state aid. It's pretty much a certain fact. There's hiring freezes, there's wage freezes going on all over. I've already seen it. I've read about it. It's kind of not a bad preemptive action. We've been discussing it for the last year or two. So I was happy to see this put in there. I'm not sure what his whole intent is. I went down a little bit. Some of the columns have it taken out, the raises. Some of them don't. There's a lot of numbers that don't jive there, but I would like to just say right now, I would make a motion for a wage freeze for the town and the people that are coming up to collective bargain these contracts coming up. I would urge them to try to convince the union members that the situation we're in, and we might have to tighten our belts for a little bit, because the next couple of years, there might be some issues, and we got a lot of projects we're trying to fund, a lot of things that need to be done. So
Right.
I'm happy to see that. Hopefully it's got a good meaning to it. Thank you.
Yep, good point, Chuck. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about like other towns too in the wake of the pandemic and the financial impact to the towns. They're talk about furloughing employees, and that's not something that's beyond the realm of possibility at this point too. So I mean, again, when we look to the Board of Selectmen's input in this Article 2, there actually could be revisiting the collective bargaining agreement that's been ratified with the expectation that some of the provisions won't take effect right away, or as Chuck said, there may be some collective bargaining agreements that are going to be renegotiated, or at this point, you know, looking at reality when we're looking at raises for the upcoming years. All right, is everybody comfortable with the new format of the Article 2? Are there anybody that has significant questions on its format that would prohibit us from moving forward with reviewing the lines and questioning lines for discussion?
Good.
Good.
Okay, so typically what we do at this point in the budget discussion process is to go page by page the same way we do in town meeting and question any lines that we want to have a conversation about, possibly look to have a different recommendation for the requested amount from the department. And then we'll either, depends on the amount of time we have, we can start the discussion on specific lines, and then we'll take a vote to recommend all of the unquestioned lines, and then we'll revisit each individual line with discussion and vote the FinCom recommendation for Article 2 line items for town meeting. Is anybody not clear on the process? Does anybody would like to suggest that we go about it any other way? Seeing none, we'll take a look at page 1. Again, we're looking at Article 2 TA draft that has a date at the bottom that says 4/14/2020. Does anybody not have that copy? It looks like everybody has the same copy. Okay, so page 1, we have lines 1 through 57. Questions? So if there's a...
Yep. I
Go
mean, as you heard my little talk earlier, and with Frank's no COLA line, I would be questioning all the salaries that are not union negotiated. That's
Okay.
actually a lot of lines. I started marking some off.
Sure.
There's quite a few if you want to go through them.
Yep, let's go.
One by one.
Yep.
Okay. All right. I've got 5, 6, 7, 8, 22, 25, 27, 34, 36, 44, 46, 47, 48, 50. How far did you go, Rick? I'm working up.
It goes to 57 on page 1.
Okay, so 50 was my last one. Those are my questions.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions on lines on page 1, other than the ones Chuck just reviewed? Dave?
Number 19.
Number 19. Anybody else?
41.
41. Well, we're gonna go through it one more time too, so if you see something in the meantime, don't, we're gonna go back and take a look at it again, so. Page 2. Lines 60 through 105.
Number 60, 66, 68, 69, 75, 91, 99, and unless I missed some, that's it up until that number point.
Okay. Anybody else?
'93,
93.
95,
95. Okay, so on that page, we have 60, 66, 68, 69, 75, 91, 93, 95, and 99. Page 3. We have lines 110, line 173. Chuck.
110, 114, 120, 121, 130, 134, 145, 148, 149, 152, 154, 160, 166. I think that's it.
Okay, anybody else on page 3?
Can I just ask a question, Chuck?
Sure.
What pattern are you looking for to help you identify the numbers?
Just salary lines.
He was saying any salary lines that aren't affected by collective bargaining.
Correct.
Okay.
139,
139.
So is 156 a collective bargaining position?
Oh, I don't know. I think I missed that one.
He actually has in a column over to the side, local 795, OPEIU.
yeah.
If you see way over to the right,
I do.
you'll
So-
see that.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's an indication that position is a union collectively bargained position.
Thank you.
But you want to
Correct.
question 155? Is that what you said? Or is that why you're not questioning it?
I might have looked at that. I've been working off two sheets, the one I got today and another one. So I'm not
Okay.
going to question that. I know it's pretty sure that's his reasoning.
Okay. All right, page 4. We have lines 175 to 219. Chuck?
Okay. 184, 188, 197, 199, 200, 206, 210, 211, 217. That's it.
Anybody else, any lines on page 4?
194.
$194.
And 216.
216. Okay, that's it on page 4. We'll move to page 5. We have lines 220 to 260. Chuck,
225, 226, 2, no, not 231, I'll skip that. 239, and I believe that's it.
anybody else, any other lines on page 5?
233.
233. Okay, any others on that page? We'll move to page 6. So we have lines 261A to line 431.
Okay, oh, Rick, I missed one on the previous page. If I
Okay.
can just jump back.
Yep, we'll go back, page 5,
244,
44.
244, yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, and back to page 6.
Let's see. Um, 410,
410. That's the only salary line on there. Anybody else on any other lines on page
always.
6? All right, we'll move to page 7. We have lines 432 to 440. So it looks like on page 7 now, the bargaining number has been left in available levy to fund all contracts. John, we had a conversation about this last week. You remember about
Yeah.
how
Well,
we're going to incorporate that?
he's got it down at the bottom. The $87,000. That's his line, and I just that total Article 2 with additional 4 contracts. I just added that to the total Article 2 number of 41,351,723, just so that I could keep track of it in my revenue forecast. So there was really no discussion on. I did ask him, Frank, about it, or I think we asked him about it last week, on how he intends to do that, and there's no clarity at this point, as far as I know, on how he plans to get that into Article 2.
Yeah, so it looks like it'd have to be a separate warrant article. It would have to be,
Which
He
it always
says-
has, and yeah, that's what he's done in the past.
yeah, and it's in the available levy in order to fund all contracts, but it has been a warrant article in the warrant before now, you know?
Okay.
I think because he was trying to put it in Article 2, now it doesn't have its own place setter in the warrant, right?
Well, I mean, he definitely needs to get it in somewhere.
Right. Kathleen?
Am I misreading the budget reserve is going from 43,000 to 232,000?
That's for the enterprise fund. So it's kind of hard to read in this format because it goes over 2 pages. But if you go back to page 6, you'll see that the enterprise fund is broken into 2 columns. Basically at the top, you have the revenue, and the revenue is what comes in. So it's basically what we, the water and sewer charges that the people pay. One of the big changes you'll see this year is the system development charges. I'm sorry, the connection fees has gone up significantly. That's all the new building that's being done.
Yep.
So when they get to a point where they hook to the town water, they have to pay a significant fee to do that. So that revenue is up a lot this year. So total revenues is 5049853.
Yep.
The next column is all your expenses, and that falls over onto page 7. And if you see the total expenditures comes up to 4,817,712. By law, the enterprise fund has to be a balanced fund. So basically what they do is take the leftover and put it as budget reserve to balance. So that will actually go into enterprise free cash, or whatever you want to call it. God, I believe that's correct. Am I right there in how that works? Thank you. So by law, the enterprise fund has to be balanced because it's a pay-go type of thing. And so if we take in more revenue than we have expenses, we have to have that budget reserve line be a positive number, and that goes to free cash. If for some reason our expenses are higher than our revenue, that would be a minus number, and it comes out of our free cash.
Okay.
So that's kind of how that works.
All right, any other questions on page 7? Are there any question line items on page 7? Right now, we have none. Okay,
Bless you.
let's go back to page 1, and I'll read the question lines. And then what I'll do is I'll entertain a motion to accept the unquestioned lines, and we'll take a roll call vote. And then we'll move to page 2. I'll read the question lines. We'll take a roll call vote. Further discussion, add any other ones, and we'll take a roll call vote. So just considering the time, I probably think that once we complete the initial pass through Article 2, we'll then probably put this to rest until the next meeting, because we do have 4 weeks. And if there are other line items that we can always revisit. You can always reconsider if there's something that you want to question. Okay, so on page 1, I've got questions on line 5, 6, 7, 8, 19, 22, 25, 27, 34, 36, 41, 44, 46, 47, 48, and 50. And just for continuity, it'd probably be best to have the same person motion and the same person second. Just makes Samantha's job a little bit easier if we can. So are there any other line items the committee would like to question on page 1? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion then to approve the unquestioned line items on page 1 from 1 to 57.
Come on, Chuck, you did all the work on this. Why don't you be the guy that gets to do all the motions on everyone?
I'll make a motion to accept the lines that are not questioned.
Okay,
Dave
Motion-
Cordero,
Dave Cordero seconds. So we have a motion by Chuck, Dave seconds. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll go to a roll call vote on the unquestioned lines. Kathleen,
Yes.
Dave,
yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Rosemary,
Yes.
and I vote yes. 0. Okay, going to page 2. So from line item 60 to 105, I have the following question line items. Line 60, line 66, line 68, line 69, line 75, line 91, line 93, line 95, and line 99. Are there any additional lines that anybody would like to include for question lines from 60 to 105? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept all we'll vote to accept all unquestioned lines.
I'll make that motion to accept all the unquestioned lines.
Dave Cordero, second.
Okay, Chuck and Dave, further discussion. All in favor, roll call vote. Kathleen,
Yes.
Dave.
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Rosemary,
Yes.
and I vote yes. 8-0. Okay, so moving on to page 3. Lines 110 to lines 173. We have questions on the following lines. 110, 114, 120, 121, 130, 134, 139, 145, 148, 149, 152, 154, 160, and 166. Are there any additional lines other than the ones I mentioned that we would like to question?
135.
135. Any others?
Was 120, oh, sorry, was 122 one of those?
It was not. Would you like to add it?
Yes, I'm not going to vote that in because they haven't negotiated anything. Yes.
122 is now a question line. Anybody else? Okay, so seeing no other question lines on page 3, I'll entertain a motion to accept all unquestioned lines from 110 to 173.
Motion to accept all unquestioned lines.
Dave Cordero, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor, roll call. Kathleen?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Rosemary?
Yes.
And I vote yes, 8-0. Okay, moving on to page 4. We have lines 175 to 219 on page 4 of 7. And I have the following lines questioned. 184, 188, 194, 197, 199, 200, 206, 210, 211, 216, 217. Anybody like to add anything else to that list?
I'd like to add line 178.
178. I think we probably question 175 until we get an assessment.
Yeah,
Hate to accept that now.
yeah, good move.
Did we have 205?
Right now, we have 206. We don't have 205. Would you like to add it?
205, please.
Okay, anybody else? All right, so on page 4, lines 175 to 219, I'll entertain a motion to accept all unquestioned lines.
Motion to accept all unquestioned lines.
Dave Cordero, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor, roll call. Kathleen?
Yes,
Dave?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes,
John?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Rosemary?
Yes.
And I vote yes, 8-0. Page 5, we have lines 220 to line 260. Right now, we have questions on the following lines: 225, 226, 233, 239, 244. Are there any other additional lines that would like to be questioned? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept all unquestioned lines on page 5 from 220 to 260.
Motion to accept all unquestioned lines.
Dave Cordero, second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Kathleen?
yes,
Dave?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Scott?
yes,
John?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Rosemary?
Yes.
And I vote yes, 8-0. We're moving to page 6. We have lines 261A to line 431. And currently, we have a question on line 410. Are there any other question lines on page 6? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept all unquestioned lines on page 6 from 261A to 431.
Motion to accept all unquestioned lines.
Dave Cordero, second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor, roll call vote. Kathleen?
yes,
Dave?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Scott?
yes,
John?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Rosemary?
Yes.
And I vote yes, 8-0. And on the final page, we have lines 432 to line 440. Right now, we have no question lines on this page. Does anybody wish to add any? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to accept all unquestioned lines on page 7.
Motion to accept all unquestioned lines.
Dave Cordero, second.
We have a motion in a second. Further discussion? Okay, we'll go for a roll call vote to accept. Kathleen?
yes,
Dave?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Scott?
yes,
John?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Rosemary?
Yes.
And I vote yes, 8-0. Okay, so we now have more or less an outline for our discussion for the next 4 weeks, at least, for the question lines on Article 2. That pretty much concludes the agenda items. We have no communications in the mailbox. accepted the previous minutes. Does anybody have any other business they would like to bring up on a new business? Okay, so we're posted just for information, discussion with Al. Al Cafferty is not able to make these meetings at 5 o'clock. His job is COVID-19 related, and there's, it's not really fair to eliminate anybody from voting recommendations for town meeting. So we want to make sure he gets back into the meeting. So we'll be meeting next week at 7 o'clock. Does anybody have a conflict with 7 o'clock for next week?
I like 7.
Okay, and if you look at the schedule on the agenda, we have, upcoming meetings into April. We also are going to continue into May, so I'll have to update this. We still have 4 meetings in May as well because our town meeting is postponed. So if, in fact, we have somebody that can't make a particular meeting, take a look at your schedules, and next week we'll make a schedule. We can postpone a meeting if we're not going to have full quorum. I think it's important that our recommendations reflect, everybody on the committee when we post our recommendations on the warrant. So if someone has a problem with any of the dates, just bring it up next week and we'll maybe take it into consideration to just pass over that date.
So
All right,
real quick, you do not have a meeting scheduled for April 28th, just so we'll have a week off after
We
next
do.
meeting. Okay.
Yes, yep. There's no meeting scheduled on the 28th.
Next
Week's the 21st. Yeah, and next week at 7 o'clock. After that, we'll have a week off, and then we'll plow into May with a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen on the first Tuesday of May.
John Galvin, just quickly, did you record are you recording all these?
Yes, they get posted on the WHCA YouTube page.
Okay, that'll be good to go over the minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks a lot.
Yep, the meetings are posted on the WHCA website, so you can see them anytime.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion?
Okay, second by Ralph.
Okay.
Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Kathleen?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Rosemary?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you, Justin and Randy, for sitting in and adding your input. We appreciate you taking the time to be here. And as always, thank you, Samantha and John, for running the meeting.
Yep. Thank you,
All
John.
right, so we'll see you all
Yes.
back here next week at 7 o'clock.